London, 1814. A husband. Sophia Pierce's teacup clattered against its saucer. "Papa, surely you jest." Lord Pierce folded his newspaper with deliberate care, his expression leaving no doubt as to his seriousness. "I assure you, daughter, I do not. The matter is settled. You shall wed the Count of Edgemere before the season's end." "But I have never even met this Count," Sophia protested, rising from her chair with such haste that her muslin morning gown swirled about her ankles. "How can you possibly expect me to marry a perfect stranger?" "He is hardly a stranger to me," her father replied, unmoved by her distress. "I have known Malcolm Everton since he was a boy. His father and I were at Oxford together." Sophia paced the breakfast room, her hands clasped tightly before her. "That may be so, but I know nothing of him. Is he young? Old? Kind? Cruel? Does he dance well? Can he converse on any subject beyond hunting and horses? He is 28, well-educated, and in possession of a considerable fortune," Lord Pierce said, as if reciting items from a ledger. "Most importantly, he has agreed to assume the debts on Willow Haven." Sophia stopped pacing. The family estate, her beloved childhood home, had been mortgaged to its limits to cover her father's increasingly desperate investments. She had known things were dire, but not this dire. "So I am to be sold to save our estate," she whispered. Lord Pierce's expression softened. "Not sold, my dear. Strategically allied. The Count needs a wife of good family and impeccable reputation. We need his fortune. It is a perfectly reasonable arrangement." "Reasonable?" Sophia felt the burn of tears but refused to let them fall. "Is there nothing else to be done?" "Nothing," her father confirmed. "The Count arrives tomorrow. I expect you to receive him with all the grace and charm for which you are known." Sophia looked out the window at the garden where she had played as a child, where her mother, gone these 5 years, had taught her the names of flowers. The thought of losing Willow Haven sent a physical pain through her chest. "Very well," she said at last. "I shall meet this Count of yours." "Excellent." Lord Pierce returned to his newspaper. "Oh, and Sophia? There is one more thing you should know about Malcolm Everton." "Yes?" "They call him the Frost Count. Apparently, he has a heart of ice." The following afternoon, Sophia stood in the drawing-room, her back straight as a poker, awaiting her intended bridegroom. She had chosen her pale blue gown with care, modest enough to suggest propriety, but cut to display her slender figure to advantage. "The Count of Edgemere," the butler announced, and Sophia steeled herself. The man who entered was not what she had expected. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the fluid grace of a natural athlete. His dark hair was swept back from a high forehead, and his features were aristocratic without being cold. But his eyes, a startling shade of grey, held all the warmth of a January frost. He bowed with precise formality. "Miss Pierce." "My Lord Count." She curtsied, studying him. Handsome, certainly, but there was something remote about him, as if he observed the world from behind a pane of glass. "I trust your journey was pleasant," she ventured when he offered nothing further. It was adequate. His tone suggested conversation was an unwelcome obligation. Lord Pierce entered then, breaking the awkward silence with hearty greetings. "Everton! How good of you to come. I see you've met my Sophia." "Indeed." The Count's gaze swept over her with clinical detachment. "She will do." Sophia felt herself flush with indignation. "I beg your pardon." "For the arrangement," he clarified, apparently oblivious to the insult. "You seem healthy, well-mannered, and of good breeding. Our children should be similarly advantaged." "How practical of you to notice," she replied, her voice honey-sweet while her eyes flashed fire. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, before the mask of indifference returned. "I am a practical man, Miss Pierce. I require a wife who understands that marriage is a business arrangement, not a romantic fancy." And I require a husband who understands basic courtesy, she retorted before she could stop herself. Lord Pierce coughed nervously. Sophia, no, she is quite right, the Count interrupted. My manners were lacking. Please accept my apology, Miss Pierce. He bowed again, though his expression remained unchanged. Perhaps we might start anew. Would you care to walk in the garden? I understand from your father that you are something of a botanist. Taken aback by this unexpected olive branch, Sophia hesitated before nodding. I would be pleased to show you our gardens. As they strolled among the late summer blooms, the Count maintained a careful distance between them. Your father tells me you were educated at home rather than at a fashionable seminary. My mother believed a woman's mind deserved the same cultivation as a man's, Sophia replied. Before her passing, she ensured I studied not only the usual feminine accomplishments but also mathematics, natural philosophy, and classical literature. Unusual, he commented, though whether with approval or censure, she could not tell. And you, my lord? What interests occupy your time at Edgemere Hall? The management of my estates primarily. I have little patience for the diversions of the ton. No hunting? No racing? No gaming at White's? Hunting occasionally. The rest I find tedious. Sophia stopped beside a rosebush, its blossoms heavy with rain from the previous night. What do you find pleasing, then? Surely there must be something that brings you joy. The Count seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. Joy is an ephemeral emotion, Miss Pierce. I prefer the lasting satisfaction of duty fulfilled. How very. She searched for a word that wasn't insulting. Stoic. Practical, he corrected. As our marriage shall be. A practical solution to both our circumstances. And is that all you seek in a wife? A practical solution? The Count plucked a rose from the bush, heedless of the thorns. What else is there to seek? Love? A pretty fantasy that fades faster than these petals once cut. He held the rose out to her. Beauty and passion are transient. A solid arrangement built on mutual advantage endures. Sophia accepted the rose, careful to avoid pricking her fingers. You speak as one who has known disappointment in matters of the heart. Something dark crossed his face. I speak as one who observes the world as it is, not as poets pretend it to be. He checked his pocket watch. We should return. I have business to discuss with your father regarding the settlement. As they walked back toward the house, Sophia wondered what had happened to turn this man's heart to stone, and whether she could bear a lifetime shackled to such coldness. He is impossible, Sophia declared, pacing her bedchamber while her dearest friend, Lady Jane Rutherford, lounged on the window seat. Handsome, yes, but with all the charm of a tombstone in January. Yet you've agreed to marry him, Jane observed, helping herself to a sugared almond from the dish on Sophia's dressing table. I've agreed to save Willow Haven, Sophia corrected. There's a difference. Is there? You'll still be the Countess of Edgemere, mistress of one of the grandest estates in Derbyshire, and wife to a man who, by your own admission, is devilishly handsome. Handsome but heartless. Sophia sank onto her bed with a sigh. He informed me that our marriage would be conducted with the same attention to efficiency as a well-run dairy. Jane nearly choked on her almond. He didn't. He most certainly did. He outlined his expectations as if reciting a grocery list. I am to produce an heir and a spare, maintain his households, entertain as required for his position, and otherwise occupy myself with suitable feminine pursuits that do not interfere with his routine. Gracious! Jane's expression was a mixture of horror and fascination. And what did you say to that? I asked if he might also like to specify how many breaths I should take per minute, since he seemed intent on managing every other aspect of my existence. Jane's laughter pealed through the room. Oh, Sophia! You didn't. I did. Sophia smiled despite herself. And do you know what he did? He appeared to consider the question seriously before informing me that he trusted my judgment in matters of respiration. No. Yes. The man is entirely without humor. I'm not certain he would recognize a jest if it arrived with a formal introduction and calling card. Jane sobered. Are you quite sure you wish to proceed with this engagement? Surely there must be another way to save Willow Haven. Sophia touched the locket at her throat, which contained a miniature of her mother. There isn't. Papa has been perfectly clear on that point. Besides, the bans have been read twice already. It would cause a scandal to cry off now. Better a scandal than a lifetime of misery. Who says I shall be miserable? Sophia straightened her shoulders. The Count may have a heart of ice, but ice can be melted. Sophia Pierce, Jane said with mock severity, are you plotting to make your future husband fall in love with you? Perhaps I am. Sophia's expression turned thoughtful. He believes love is a fantasy, but I suspect someone or something taught him to believe that. If I could discover what turned him so cold, you might find the key to warming him. Jane finished. A dangerous game, my friend. More dangerous than spending my life with a man who sees me as little more than a brood mare and hostess. Sophia shook her head. I think not. Besides, I have always enjoyed a challenge. What Sophia didn't say, what she scarcely admitted to herself, was that in their brief encounters, she had glimpsed something beneath the Count's icy demeanor that intrigued her. A flash of pain in his eyes when she mentioned family. A momentary softening when he spoke of his estates. Tiny cracks in the glacial facade that suggested depths unseen. Very well, Jane said, rising to leave. But promise me you'll be careful. Men like the Count don't take kindly to having their carefully constructed walls breached. I shall be the very soul of caution, Sophia promised. But as she bid her friend goodbye, her mind was already racing with possibilities. The Frost Count might believe himself impervious to emotion, but Sophia Pierce was about to prove him very wrong indeed. The wedding was a subdued affair, attended only by close family and a handful of friends. Sophia wore ivory silk with Brussels lace, her mother's pearls at her throat and wrists. The Count was resplendent in a midnight blue coat, his cravat arranged in a complicated knot that spoke of a valet's devoted attention. They spoke their vows clearly, exchanged rings, and signed the register without any outward sign of either joy or distress. Only Sophia's slightly trembling hands betrayed her inner turmoil as she wrote her name for the last time as Miss Pierce. The wedding breakfast that followed was similarly restrained, though Lord Pierce had spared no expense on the food and wine. As the gathering drew to a close, Sophia found herself alone with her new husband for the first time since the ceremony. "Are you ready to depart, Countess?" he asked, using her new title with formal correctness. "Yes, my lord." She matched his tone. "I have said my goodbyes." He offered his arm, and she placed her gloved hand upon it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fine wool of his coat. Together they walked to the waiting carriage that would carry them to London for a brief stay before continuing to Edgemere Hall. As they settled into the carriage, Sophia took a deep breath. "I hope you will not find me too forward, husband, but I wonder if we might discuss certain matters before we reach our destination." The Count raised an eyebrow. "What matters did you have in mind?" "Our living arrangements," she said carefully. "I understand from my father that you maintain separate chambers for the master and mistress at Edgemere Hall." "As is customary in houses of our station," he replied, his expression unreadable. "Indeed. And I assume you expect to visit my chambers when necessary for the continuation of your line." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "That is generally how these things are arranged, yes." Sophia summoned her courage. "I would know your expectations in that regard. I am not entirely ignorant of marital relations, but neither am I experienced, and I would prefer not to be taken by surprise." For the first time since she'd met him, the Count looked genuinely disconcerted. "This is hardly an appropriate conversation for a wedding day. On the contrary, I can think of no more appropriate time." She met his gaze steadily. "We have committed ourselves to a lifetime together. Surely we can speak honestly about how that life will unfold." He studied her for a long moment before answering. "Very well. I expect to visit your chambers occasionally, as duty requires." I will endeavor to make the experience as unobjectionable as possible. Once we have secured the succession with a son or two, such visits will naturally become less frequent. I see. Sophia folded her hands in her lap. And if I should find these visits not merely unobjectionables but perhaps even pleasurable? Would that disturb your orderly plans? The Count's eyes widened fractionally. You are remarkably direct, madam. I believe in clarity, she replied. Particularly in matters of importance. A commendable trait. He looked away, watching the countryside roll past the carriage window. To answer your question, mutual satisfaction is not incompatible with my orderly plans, as you put it. But I would caution you against expecting romance. Physical pleasure and emotional entanglement are distinct matters. So you say, Sophia murmured. Yet I wonder if the body and heart can be so neatly separated. They can and should be, he said firmly. Emotional entanglements lead only to pain and disappointment. Sophia tilted her head. You speak from experience, my lord. His expression closed like a door slamming shut. I speak from observation. And I believe this conversation has reached its natural conclusion. He turned fully toward the window, effectively ending the discussion, but not before Sophia caught a glimpse of something raw in his eyes, something that told her she had touched a nerve. Good, she thought. The Frost Count wasn't quite as frozen as he pretended to be. And that gave her hope. Their stay in London lasted a fortnight, long enough for the Count to introduce his new bride at court and for Sophia to be properly presented to the Ton as the Countess of Edgemere. She navigated the social whirl with grace, charming even the most critical dowagers and turning the heads of gentlemen who wondered how such a lively creature had ended up married to the notorious Frost Count. For his part, Malcolm performed his social duties with rigid correctness, neither encouraging nor discouraging his wife's popularity. They maintained separate bedchambers at his London residence, and though he visited her room on 3 occasions during their stay, the encounters were brief and, as he had promised, not unpleasant, but neither were they particularly intimate beyond the physical act itself. After each visit, he would rise, don his dressing gown, and with a courteous good night, Countess, return to his own room, leaving Sophia staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was truly to be the pattern of her married life. On the eve of their departure for Edgemere Hall, Sophia attended a musical soirée with Jane while the Count remained at home, pleading correspondence that required his attention. How goes the great Thaw? Jane asked as they sipped punch between performances. Glacially, Sophia admitted with a wry smile. The man is politeness itself in public, attention itself in the bedchamber, and a perfect stranger everywhere else. Perhaps Edgemere Hall will provide more opportunities to breach his defenses, Jane suggested. You'll be on his territory, able to observe him in his natural habitat, as it were. That is my hope. There must be something or someone there who can tell me what transformed an ordinary man into this automaton. Perhaps not someone but something, came a voice from behind them. They turned to find Lady Meredith Spencer, a formidable widow known for her encyclopedic knowledge of society's secrets. Forgive the intrusion, but I couldn't help overhearing your reference to your husband. Sophia exchanged a glance with Jane. Lady Spencer, how kind of you to join us. Have you some insight into the Count's character? The older woman lowered her voice. Not his character so much as his history. Did you know he was engaged once before? About 5 years ago, to Caroline Pembroke. Sophia's pulse quickened. I was not aware. What happened? She jilted him most cruelly, only weeks before the wedding. Ran off with his cousin, a charming ne'er-do-well who'd gambled away his inheritance. The scandal was hushed up, the Evertons have influence, but those in the know were aware. How dreadful, Sophia murmured, mind racing. A broken engagement would certainly explain his cynicism about love, but there seemed to be more to the story. Do you know why she left him? Lady Spencer leaned closer. The whispers suggested she found him too controlled. Too proper. She craved passion, or so she claimed when defending her actions. But there was also talk that the Count discovered something about her that made him withdraw emotionally, and she turned to the cousin for the affection she no longer received from her betrothed. And what became of them? Caroline and the cousin? Dead, both of them. Lady Spencer's eyes glittered with the excitement of sharing tragedy. Their ship went down in a storm off the coast of Spain not 6 months after they fled. Poetic justice, some said. Sophia felt a chill. No wonder Malcolm guarded himself so carefully. He had lost not only his fiancée to betrayal but also his cousin, someone who should have been like a brother. Lady Spencer, you've been most illuminating, she said. I wonder, though, if you might keep this conversation between us? My husband is a private man, and I would not wish to cause him discomfort by appearing to gossip about his past. Of course, my dear. Lady Spencer patted her hand. We widows must look out for the newly wedded, after all. Marriage is complicated enough without the ghosts of the past haunting your bedchamber. As Lady Spencer drifted away, Jane squeezed Sophia's arm. Well, there's your answer. Your husband was betrayed by love. Not by love, Sophia corrected thoughtfully. By a person he loved. There's a difference, one I suspect he has failed to recognize. And you intend to enlighten him? Jane asked. Sophia smiled. I intend to try. Edgemere Hall rose from the Derbyshire countryside like something from a fairy tale, a grand stone mansion with turrets and gables and mullioned windows that caught the afternoon sun as the Count's carriage approached. Sophia leaned forward, drinking in her first sight of her new home. It's magnificent, she breathed. It has been in my family for 10 generations, Malcolm said, a hint of pride warming his normally cool tone. The central portion dates from Tudor times, though my great-grandfather added the east and west wings. I can't wait to explore it all. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, will show you through tomorrow, he said. Tonight, I thought you might prefer to rest after our journey. That's very considerate, thank you. Sophia studied his profile, wondering if this small kindness signaled a softening. Will you dine with me this evening? He glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. I generally take dinner in my study when at Edgemere. Alone? Every night. It's more efficient, he explained. I can review estate matters while I eat. I see. Sophia kept her tone light. Well, perhaps tonight you might make an exception. It is, after all, my first night in our home. Malcolm hesitated, then inclined his head slightly. As you wish. The carriage rolled to a stop before the grand entrance, where a line of servants waited to greet their new mistress. Sophia put on her most gracious smile as Malcolm handed her down from the carriage. Welcome to Edgemere Hall, my lady, said a dignified woman of middle years, curtsying. I am Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper. I'm delighted to meet you, Mrs. Winters, Sophia replied warmly. One by one, the senior staff were presented, the butler, Mr. Graves, the cook, Mrs. Fletcher, the head gardener, Mr. Brooks, and Malcolm's valet, Richards. Sophia greeted each with genuine interest, asking small questions that revealed her desire to know them as people, not merely servants. Malcolm observed this with a slightly perplexed expression, as if watching a foreign ritual whose significance escaped him. When the introductions were complete, he offered Sophia his arm. Shall we go in? You must be tired. Not at all, she assured him, placing her hand on his sleeve. I'm quite invigorated by new surroundings. The entrance hall was impressive, 2 stories high with a grand staircase sweeping up to a gallery. Portraits of stern-faced Evertons lined the walls, and a massive chandelier hung from the carved ceiling. Sophia's footsteps echoed on the marble floor as Malcolm led her through to a drawing room decorated in shades of blue and gold. This is the Duchess's drawing room, he explained. So called because Queen Anne once took tea here when she was still a princess. It will be your domain primarily, for receiving guests and such. It's lovely, Sophia said, trailing her fingers along the back of a gilt chair. Though perhaps a bit formal for everyday use. There's a smaller parlour adjacent to your suite for your personal use. He hesitated, then added, my mother preferred it for her needlework and correspondence. I should like to see it. He nodded to Mrs. Winters, who stepped forward. I'll have your things taken up, my lady, and show you to your rooms." Sophia turned to Malcolm. "Will you not accompany us?" "I have matters to attend to," he said. "Estate business that has accumulated during my absence. Mrs. Winters will see to your comfort." "Of course." Sophia hid her disappointment. "Until dinner, then." His lips twitched in what might almost have been a smile. "Until dinner." As Mrs. Winters led her up the grand staircase, Sophia glanced back to see Malcolm watching her ascent, his expression unreadable. For a moment their eyes met across the distance, and something passed between them, a current of awareness that vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Then he turned and strode away, leaving Sophia to wonder if she had imagined that brief connection. The Countess's suite occupied the entire east corner of the second floor, a bedroom with a magnificent four-poster bed, a dressing room, a private bath chamber fitted with modern plumbing, and the parlor Malcolm had mentioned. This last was a charming room with windows overlooking the formal gardens, furnished with comfortable chairs, a writing desk, and bookshelves filled with volumes that suggested his mother had been a woman of intelligence and varied interests. Sophia ran her fingers along the spines: novels by Fanny Burney and Maria Edgeworth, poetry collections, histories, and several scientific treatises. On the desk sat a silver-framed miniature of a handsome woman with Malcolm's grey eyes and a warm smile that her son had clearly not inherited. Was she kind? Sophia asked Mrs. Winters, who was supervising the unpacking of Sophia's trunks. The late Countess? Oh yes, my lady. She had a heart as big as all outdoors, as they say. Never had a harsh word for anyone, and always thinking of others' comfort. The housekeeper smiled at the memory. She would have liked you, if I may be so bold. Thank you. Sophia carefully returned the miniature to its place. And the late Count? What was he like? Mrs. Winters's expression grew more reserved. A great man, very respected. Devoted to Edgemere and its people. But perhaps not so warm as his wife. Sophia guessed. It's not my place to say, my lady. Of course. Forgive me for putting you in an awkward position. Sophia moved to the window, looking out at the gardens below. How long have you served at Edgemere, Mrs. Winters? 32 years, my lady. I came as an under-housemaid when I was just 16, and worked my way up. So you've known my husband since he was a child? Since the day he was born. There was unmistakable affection in the housekeeper's voice. A serious little boy, he was, always with his nose in a book or following his father around the estate, learning his duties. Was he always so reserved? Mrs. Winters seemed to choose her words carefully. The young master had his share of high spirits as a boy, especially when his cousin Robert visited. But he took his responsibilities very seriously from a young age, particularly after his mother passed when he was 12. The late Count believed that duty came before all else, you see, and Master Malcolm, that is, his lordship, wished very much to please his father. So Malcolm had lost his mother young, and been raised by a father who valued duty above emotion. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Thank you, Mrs. Winters, Sophia said. You've been most helpful. I hope we shall become good friends, as I learn my way around Edgemere. The housekeeper looked startled, then pleased. That would be an honor, my lady. When Mrs. Winters had gone, Sophia sat at the writing desk, making mental notes of what she had learned. Malcolm had experienced two significant losses, his mother in childhood and his fiancée in adulthood, and been raised by a father who emphasized duty over feeling. No wonder he kept his emotions locked away, they had brought him nothing but pain. But somewhere beneath that carefully constructed armor was the boy who had once laughed with his cousin, who had loved his mother, who had perhaps even loved Caroline before her betrayal. That was the man Sophia needed to reach. And dinner, she decided, would be her first real opportunity. Malcolm arrived at the dining room precisely at 8 o'clock to find Sophia already seated at one end of the long table, a setting prepared for him at the other end, some 20 feet away. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene, the candles, the flowers, his wife in a gown of deep green that complemented her fair coloring. You look well, Countess, he said, moving to his chair. "Thank you, my lord." She smiled, then frowned slightly. "Though I confess, I feel we might as well be dining in separate rooms, given the distance between us." Malcolm glanced at the length of polished mahogany separating them. "This is how formal dinner is traditionally arranged. Must we be formal when dining alone? Could you not sit closer?" He hesitated, then gestured to a footman, who quickly reset his place at the side of the table, perpendicular to Sophia's position. "Better." "Much," she said as he took his seat. "Now we may converse without shouting across the vastness." The first course was served, a clear soup with delicate vegetables, and they ate in silence for a few moments before Sophia spoke again. "Your home is even more impressive than I had imagined," she said. "Though I've only seen a small portion so far." "It is a significant responsibility," he replied. 7,000 acres, plus the home farm, the tenants, the village. You manage it all yourself? With the help of a capable steward, yes. He took a sip of wine. My father believed a man should understand every aspect of his holdings. And did you find that a burden as a young man? Or a pleasure? Malcolm considered this, as if no one had ever asked him the question before. Both, I suppose. It was gratifying to earn my father's approval, but his standards were exacting. Mrs. Winters mentioned you lost your mother when you were quite young. That must have been difficult. His face closed slightly. It was a long time ago. Grief doesn't always fade with time, Sophia said gently. Sometimes it merely becomes a familiar companion. Malcolm set down his spoon, studying her with those penetrating grey eyes. You speak as one who knows. My mother died when I was 17. Old enough to understand what I had lost, but young enough to still need her desperately. I'm sorry, he said, and seemed to mean it. Were you close? Very. She taught me everything of value that I know, not just embroidery and etiquette, but how to think for myself, how to find joy in small things, how to love openly without fear. Malcolm's expression grew distant. My mother was similar in some ways. She believed in kindness above all else. My father found it charming but impractical. And you? What do you believe? I believe kindness has its place, but cannot be the guiding principle of a life that involves responsibility for others. Decisions must be made based on reason, not sentiment. Sophia leaned forward slightly. Might they not be guided by both? Reason and sentiment working in harmony rather than opposition. A pleasant theory, but one that rarely survives contact with reality. He signaled for the next course. You mentioned wanting to explore Edgemere. Perhaps tomorrow I might show you the library. I believe it would interest you, given your reading habits. Sophia recognized the change of subject for what it was, a retreat from emotional territory, but decided not to press. I would like that very much. Is it extensive? Quite. My grandfather was a collector of rare volumes, and each generation has added to the collection. There are some interesting botanical works that might appeal to you, given your interest in the subject. Sophia brightened. You remembered. I make it a point to remember details of importance, he said, as if it were a matter of business rather than personal interest. And my interests are of importance, she asked, a teasing note in her voice. For a moment, Malcolm looked almost flustered. You are my wife. Your contentment is a matter of concern to me. Not happiness, Sophia noted. Contentment. As if she were a horse that needed appropriate stabling and exercise. Still, it was something, an acknowledgement, however grudging, that her feelings mattered to him on some level. Then I shall look forward to our tour of the library, she said, deciding to count the evening as a small victory. And perhaps you might also show me the estate sometime? I should like to understand what occupies so much of your attention. Malcolm looked surprised, then thoughtful. Few women take an interest in estate management. I am not few women, Sophia replied with a hint of mischief. I am your wife. And I wish to understand your world, Malcolm. It was the first time she had used his given name, and she saw the impact register in his eyes, a brief widening, a flash of something that might have been pleasure. "Very well. Sophia," he said, her name sounding foreign on his tongue. "We shall ride out tomorrow afternoon, weather permitting." She smiled, genuinely delighted by this small concession. "I shall look forward to it." As the meal progressed, their conversation remained largely impersonal, but Sophia noticed subtle shifts in Malcolm's demeanor, a slight relaxation of his shoulders, an occasional almost smile when she made a gently humorous observation. By the time dessert was served, she felt as though a hairline crack had appeared in his icy facade. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The following week settled into a pattern. Mornings saw Sophia learning the workings of the great house from Mrs. Winters, while afternoons were often spent riding with Malcolm as he showed her the extent of his lands. In the evenings, they dined together, their conversations gradually becoming less stilted as Sophia gently encouraged Malcolm to share his thoughts on books, agriculture, and occasionally, politics. They still maintained separate bedchambers, and Malcolm's visits to hers remained infrequent and brief, though Sophia noted with private satisfaction that he lingered a little longer each time, sometimes even engaging in drowsy conversation before returning to his own room. It was progress, but painfully slow, until the arrival of an unexpected visitor changed everything. Sophia was in the conservatory, making sketches of an unusual orchid, when Mrs. Winters appeared at the glass doors. "Begging your pardon, my lady, but there's a visitor asking for his lordship. A Mr. Sebastian Pembroke." Sophia's pencil stilled. Pembroke, the same surname as Malcolm's former fiancée. Did he state his business? "No, my lady. Only that it was a personal matter of some urgency." "Where is my husband?" "Riding the north boundary with Mr. Brooks. They won't be back for hours." Sophia set aside her sketchbook. "Then I shall receive Mr. Pembroke. Please show him to the Duchess's drawing room, and have tea brought." "Yes, my lady." Mrs. Winters hesitated. "Should I send a groom to fetch his lordship?" Sophia considered. "No, I think not yet. Let me ascertain the nature of Mr. Pembroke's visit first." Minutes later, Sophia entered the drawing room to find a slender young man of perhaps 25 pacing before the fireplace. He turned at her entrance, and she was struck by his resemblance to someone she couldn't quite place, until he bowed and she caught the familiar grey of his eyes. "Lady Edgemere," he said, his voice carrying a hint of nervousness. "Thank you for receiving me. I'm Sebastian Pembroke." "Mr. Pembroke." Sophia gestured to a chair. "Please, be seated. I understand you wish to speak with my husband, but he is from home at present. Perhaps I might be of assistance." The young man sat, perching on the edge of his chair. "That's very kind, my lady, but I fear the matter is rather delicate." "I am his wife," Sophia said gently. "There are few matters concerning him that would not concern me as well." Sebastian looked down at his hands, which were twisting in his lap. "It concerns my sister, Caroline. And my brother, Robert." So this was Caroline's brother, and by extension, a relation of Malcolm's as well. Sophia kept her expression neutral. "I see. And what of them?" "They're alive," Sebastian blurted. "Both of them." The reports of their deaths were mistaken. Sophia felt as though the floor had tilted beneath her. "I beg your pardon. Their ship did sink off Spain, but they were rescued by a fishing boat. They've been living in a small village in Catalonia these 5 years, under assumed names. Robert was injured in the wreck, his leg, and they had little money. It's only recently that they've managed to send word home." "And you've come to tell my husband this news?" Sebastian nodded miserably. "I must. Robert is his cousin, after all. And Caroline, well, I know there was ill feeling, but surely after all this time." "Mr. Pembroke," Sophia said carefully, "I think it would be best if you told me exactly what occurred between your sister and my husband before their supposed deaths. I have heard rumors, but I would prefer facts." The young man looked startled. "He hasn't told you." "My husband is a private man." Sebastian sighed. It's a sorry tale, my lady. Caroline and Malcolm were engaged to be married. It was a good match, she had beauty and charm, he had the title and fortune. But Caroline, she was always flighty, seeking excitement. Malcolm is more reserved. Sophia supplied. Exactly. At first, Caroline found his seriousness attractive, a challenge, she said. But as the wedding approached, she grew restive. And Robert, Malcolm's cousin, was everything Malcolm wasn't, charming, reckless, full of wild schemes. So she fell in love with Robert instead. Sebastian shook his head. I don't know if it was love, exactly. Infatuation, certainly. But there was more to it. He hesitated. You must understand, my sister is not a bad person, but she has a talent for self-deception. She convinced herself that Malcolm didn't truly love her, that he was marrying her out of duty rather than affection. And was she right? Sophia asked, her heart beating faster. I don't think so. Malcolm was never demonstrative, but there was a time when he looked at Caroline as if she were the sun and stars combined. Sebastian's expression grew troubled. The change came after he discovered that Robert had been embezzling from the estate accounts. What? Robert managed some of the Edgemere business affairs. He developed a gambling habit and began taking small sums, intending to repay them with his winnings. But the winnings never materialized, and the amounts grew. Malcolm discovered the discrepancy just weeks before the wedding. And confronted Robert, I presume. Yes. There was a terrible row. Malcolm was prepared to cover the losses quietly, to avoid scandal, but he insisted Robert leave England. Caroline overheard part of the argument and misunderstood. She thought Malcolm was being cruel and unforgiving. When Robert announced he was leaving for Spain, she impulsively decided to go with him. Left a note for Malcolm saying she couldn't marry a man with such a cold heart. Sophia closed her eyes briefly, imagining the blow this must have been to Malcolm, betrayed not only by his fiancée but by his cousin, a man who was practically his brother. And now they wish to return. Sebastian nodded. Robert's leg never healed properly. He needs better medical care than the village can provide. And Caroline. I believe she regrets her actions. Not that she expects Malcolm would take her back, he added hurriedly, but she would like his forgiveness, if that's possible. I see. Sophia rose, moving to the window to gather her thoughts. This news would devastate Malcolm, reopening old wounds just as he was beginning to thaw toward her. Yet keeping it from him was unthinkable. When do they plan to return to England? They're already here, Sebastian admitted. In London. I came ahead to prepare the way, as it were. Before Sophia could respond, the drawing-room door opened and Malcolm entered, still in his riding clothes, his expression thunderous. Mrs. Winters said we had a visitor, he began, then stopped short at the sight of Sebastian. Pembroke? What the devil are you doing here? Sebastian rose, his face pale. Malcolm. I mean, Lord Edgemere. I came to tell you that your sister and my cousin are alive, Malcolm finished, his voice arctic. Yes, I gathered as much when I saw your carriage. He turned to Sophia. I apologize for the interruption to your day, Countess. Mr. Pembroke was just leaving. Malcolm, Sophia said softly, perhaps you should hear what he has to say. I have no interest in anything concerning Caroline Pembroke or Robert Everton. His jaw was set like granite. Sebastian stepped forward. Please, Malcolm. They've been through a terrible ordeal. Robert's leg is no concern of mine, Malcolm cut in. They made their choice 5 years ago. Now I have made mine. He pulled the bell rope sharply. Graves will show you out, Pembroke. Do not return to Edgemere. When the butler appeared, Malcolm gave curt instructions, then strode from the room without a backward glance. Sebastian looked at Sophia with desperate eyes. My lady, please. If you could speak with him, I will try, Sophia promised. But I make no guarantees. My husband can be resolute when his mind is set. Robert is dying, Sebastian said quietly. The doctors give him months at most. His last wish is to make peace with Malcolm. Sophia's heart constricted. Leave your direction in London. I shall write to you when I can. After Sebastian had gone, Sophia went in search of her husband. She found him in the library, a glass of brandy in his hand, staring out at the gathering dusk. So, he said without turning, now you know the sordid tale of my past. I suppose you have questions. Sophia moved to stand beside him, close but not touching. Only one. Are you all right? He glanced at her, surprise momentarily replacing the anger in his eyes. That's your question? Not whether I still love her, or if I'm tempted to cast you aside now that she's returned. No, Sophia said simply. Those aren't my questions because I already know the answers. You don't love Caroline anymore, if you ever truly did, and you're a man of honor who would never abandon his vows. What concerns me is your pain. Finding out they're alive after believing them dead for 5 years, it must be a shock. Malcolm drained his glass. I'm not in pain. I'm angry. They let me believe they were dead. Let everyone believe it. Do you know what that did to their families? To Caroline's parents? To mine? My father never recovered from the loss of Robert. He died believing his nephew and heir after me had perished because of my harshness. Is that what you believe? That Robert fled because you were too harsh. No. He fled because he was a thief and a coward. Malcolm set down his empty glass with careful precision. But my father didn't see it that way. He thought I should have forgiven Robert, kept the matter private, allowed him to remain at Edgemere. And Caroline? Did your father blame you for her desertion as well? A muscle worked in Malcolm's jaw. He said I should have shown her more affection. That a woman needs demonstrations of feeling, not just fidelity and provision. A wise man, your father, Sophia said softly. A sentimental one, Malcolm corrected. Had I been more guarded with my feelings, rather than less, I might have seen Caroline's true nature sooner. Or you might have pushed away the only woman who truly loved you, Sophia countered. Malcolm turned to her fully then, his eyes searching her face. You think Caroline loved me? She left me for my cousin, fled the country with him, and let me believe she was dead for 5 years. What kind of love is that? A selfish, immature one, Sophia admitted. But Sebastian seems to think she genuinely believed you didn't love her, that you were marrying her out of duty rather than affection. That's absurd. Malcolm broke off, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. You what? Sophia pressed gently. I gave her everything a woman could want. Security, position, a beautiful home. But did you give her your heart, Malcolm? Did you show her that she was more to you than a suitable match? He looked away. I'm not given to grand romantic gestures. Love isn't always grand or romantic, Sophia said. Sometimes it's as simple as asking about her day and truly listening to the answer. Or remembering how she takes her tea. Or looking at her as if she's the only person in a crowded room. Malcolm was silent for a long moment. Sebastian said Robert is dying, he finally said, his voice strained. Yes. And they want, what? Money? Forgiveness? For me to welcome them home with open arms as if nothing happened. I think they want peace, Sophia said. As do you, though you may not realize it. This anger you've carried for 5 years, it's a heavy burden, Malcolm. Perhaps it's time to set it down. He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. You make it sound so simple. Not simple. But necessary. Sophia took a risk, placing her hand on his arm. You've built walls to protect yourself from pain, but they've also kept out joy. Isn't it time to see what might grow in that protected space if you let in a little light? Malcolm looked down at her hand, then up at her face, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. You are a remarkable woman, Sophia. Remarkable enough that you might consider meeting with Robert and Caroline. He tensed again. I don't know if I can. You won't be alone, Sophia assured him. I'll be with you, if you wish. Malcolm covered her hand with his own. Why would you do that? After everything I've told you, after how I've treated you these past months, why would you stand by me? Sophia smiled. Because I took a vow. For better or worse, remember. Most women would consider a husband's jilted fiancé returning from the dead to be decidedly worse. I'm not most women, Sophia reminded him. And I'm not afraid of ghosts, Malcolm, not even those that walk and talk and have inconveniently dramatic timing. For the first time since she'd known him, Malcolm laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that transformed his face and sent a warm current through Sophia's veins. No, he said, squeezing her hand. You're certainly not most women. And for that, I find myself increasingly grateful. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even an agreement to meet with Robert and Caroline. But as Sophia looked into her husband's eyes and saw the ice there beginning to crack, she knew it was a beginning. 3 days later, Malcolm and Sophia stood in the private parlour of a discreet London hotel, waiting for the arrival of the past. Malcolm paced the room, his usual composure noticeably absent. We can still leave, Sophia offered. Send a note saying you're indisposed. Malcolm shook his head. No. You were right. This festering wound needs lancing, one way or another. A knock at the door made them both start. Malcolm drew a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and nodded to Sophia, who called, "Enter." Sebastian appeared first, followed by a thin, careworn woman whose faded beauty still carried echoes of what must once have been a stunning face. Behind her, leaning heavily on a cane, came a man who so resembled Malcolm that Sophia blinked in surprise. This, then, was Robert Everton, cousin, betrayer, and one-time heir presumptive to the Edgemere title. Malcolm, Caroline whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Thank you for seeing us. Malcolm's face remained impassive. I'm here at my wife's request. Sophia, may I present Miss Caroline Pembroke and my cousin, Mr. Robert Everton. Caroline, Robert, my wife, the Countess of Edgemere. Sophia inclined her head graciously. Miss Pembroke, Mr. Everton. Please, be seated. Mr. Everton, I understand your leg troubles you. Robert sank gratefully into a chair, his face grey with pain and exhaustion. Thank you, Lady Edgemere. You're very kind. Kinder than we deserve, Caroline added softly, taking a seat beside her brother. Malcolm, my lord, I don't know where to begin. Perhaps with an explanation of why you allowed the world to believe you dead these 5 years, Malcolm suggested, his voice cool. Caroline and Robert exchanged glances. It wasn't intentional, at first, Robert said. The ship did sink, and we were nearly drowned. A fishing boat picked us up, but I was badly injured, my leg was crushed in the wreckage. The village where we landed had no doctor, no proper medical care. I developed a fever that nearly killed me. By the time I recovered enough to think clearly, weeks had passed. We had no money, Caroline continued. No way to send word. And then? She looked down at her hands. Then we learned that everyone believed us dead. That you had mourned and moved on. It seemed kinder, somehow, to let you think that. To not reopen old wounds. Kinder, Malcolm repeated flatly. You thought it kind to let your parents grieve for a daughter they believed drowned? To let my father go to his grave mourning the nephew he loved as a son? No, Robert said, his voice cracking. It was cowardly, not kind. We told ourselves it was for the best, but in truth, we were afraid. Afraid of facing the consequences of what we'd done. Which was what, exactly? Malcolm asked. Theft? Betrayal? Adultery? Caroline flinched. There was no adultery, Malcolm. Robert and I, it wasn't like that, not at first. He was my friend when I felt alone. Alone? Malcolm's eyebrows rose. We were engaged to be married. How could you possibly have been alone? Emotionally alone, she clarified. You were always so contained. So proper. I never knew what you were thinking or feeling. Whether you truly wanted me, or merely a suitable countess. Malcolm's jaw tightened. I asked you to marry me. I gave you my mother's ring. What more evidence of my intentions did you require? Not your intentions, Caroline said, frustration evident in her voice. Your heart. I wanted to know that you loved me, that you weren't just doing what was expected of you. And so you ran away with my cousin. A logical response. It wasn't planned, Robert interjected. After our argument, after you told me I had to leave England, I went to say goodbye to Caroline. She was upset, confused. I explained that I had to go, and why. She became distressed on my behalf, said you were being too harsh. One thing led to another, and suddenly she was insisting on coming with me. I should have refused, but I was angry and hurt and I wanted to strike back at you. By taking my fiancée. Yes. Robert met Malcolm's gaze squarely. It was unforgivable. I knew it even as we boarded the ship. Caroline realized it too, once her initial anger cooled. We were going to write to you, to try to make amends somehow, when the storm hit and the ship went down. Sophia, who had been silent throughout this exchange, now spoke. What are your intentions now? Why have you returned to England? I'm dying, Robert said simply. The infection in my leg never truly healed. It spread to my blood. The doctors say I have months, at most. I'm sorry to hear that, Malcolm said, and to Sophia's surprise, he seemed genuinely to mean it. My last wish was to see England again, Robert continued. And to ask your forgiveness, Malcolm. Not to expect it, I know I don't deserve it, but to ask for it nonetheless. And you, Miss Pembroke? Sophia asked. What do you seek? Caroline looked at Malcolm with eyes full of regret. Peace. For all of us. And she hesitated. The chance to tell Malcolm that I'm sorry for the pain I caused him. That I was young and foolish and didn't understand that love comes in different forms. That what I mistook for coldness was simply his nature, reserved, perhaps, but no less deep for being so. Malcolm's expression remained unreadable, but Sophia saw his hands clench at his sides. You broke my heart, he said quietly. Both of you. The two people I trusted most in the world. I know, Robert whispered. God help me, I know. A heavy silence fell over the room. Sophia looked at her husband, at the rigid set of his shoulders, the conflict evident in his eyes. She longed to go to him, to take his hand, but instinct told her this was a moment he needed to navigate alone. Finally, Malcolm spoke. I cannot forgive you today. Perhaps not ever, completely. But I will try. He looked at Robert. You are my blood. Whatever you've done, that hasn't changed. If you need medical care, financial assistance, that is yours, without question. Robert's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Malcolm turned to Caroline. As for you, I wish you well, Caroline. Truly. But the past is past and cannot be undone. I understand, she said softly. And I wish you happiness, Malcolm. It seems you've found someone worthy of you. She glanced at Sophia with genuine admiration. Your wife must be a remarkable woman, to have brought you here today. She is, Malcolm agreed, and the warmth in his voice when he looked at Sophia made her heart skip. More remarkable than I deserve. The meeting ended shortly after, with arrangements made for Robert to consult with Malcolm's London physician. As the others took their leave, Sophia noticed Malcolm watching his cousin's painful progress with a troubled expression. You're thinking of offering them a place to stay, she observed when they were alone. Malcolm looked surprised. How did you know? Because despite your best efforts to convince the world otherwise, you have a kind heart. She took his hand. The dower house at Edgemere is currently empty, is it not? It would be a peaceful place for Robert to spend his remaining time. Malcolm studied her face. You wouldn't mind? Having them so close. I am not threatened by ghosts, Malcolm, even living ones. Sophia smiled. Besides, I think it would be good for you to make peace with your past. Not to forget it, but to reconcile with it. To let the wound heal properly, instead of simply scarring over. Malcolm raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with unexpected tenderness. How did I come to be blessed with such a wise wife? A fortunate accident of fate, Sophia replied lightly. Or perhaps divine intervention. Either way, I suggest you make the most of it. His smile, rare but increasingly frequent these days, warmed her to her toes. Indeed I shall. The weeks that followed saw a subtle but significant shift in the atmosphere at Edgemere Hall. Robert and Caroline took up residence in the dower house, where Robert's health declined steadily but peacefully under the care of the local doctor. Malcolm visited his cousin regularly, their conversations gradually moving from stilted politeness to something approaching their former camaraderie. Caroline kept a respectful distance from both Malcolm and Sophia, focusing her energies on caring for her brother. But occasionally she and Sophia would take tea together, forming a cautious friendship built on their shared concern for the cousins. His changed, Caroline observed one afternoon as they watched Malcolm and Robert conversing in the dower house garden. There's a softness to him now that wasn't there before. I think perhaps it was always there, Sophia replied. Just carefully guarded. Caroline studied her thoughtfully. You love him very much, don't you? Yes, Sophia admitted, seeing no reason to dissemble. Though I've never told him so. Why not? I'm waiting for him to be ready to hear it. And perhaps to feel it in return. He already does, Caroline said with certainty. Anyone with eyes can see it in the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. Sophia smiled, warmed by the thought but not entirely convinced. While Malcolm had indeed become more attentive, more affectionate even, he had never spoken of love. His visits to her bedchamber had grown more frequent and considerably more passionate, but he still returned to his own room afterward, maintaining that final barrier between them. That night, as they dined together in the small family dining room that had become their habit rather than the formal table, Malcolm seemed preoccupied. Sophia allowed him his silence until the final course was cleared, then asked gently, "Is Robert worse today?" Malcolm looked up, surprised. "No, actually. He seemed stronger this afternoon. It was a good day for him." "Then what troubles you? You've been lost in thought all evening." He hesitated, then said, "Robert said something today that unsettled me. He asked if I had learned from his mistakes, if I had told you how I feel about you." Sophia's heart quickened. "And how do you feel about me, Malcolm?" He rose from his chair, coming around the table to stand beside her. "I've not been fair to you, Sophia. I married you for practical reasons, to secure an heir, to gain a hostess for my home. I told myself that was enough, that sentiment had no place in a proper marriage." He took her hand. "I was wrong." "Were you?" she whispered, scarcely daring to hope. "Completely." His grey eyes, usually so guarded, were open now, revealing a depth of feeling that took her breath away. "You came into my frozen life like a summer breeze, warming everything you touched. At first I resented it, resented you for making me feel again, for making me want more than duty and obligation. And now? Now I find I cannot imagine my life without you. Not just as my wife, my countess, but as my heart's companion." He knelt beside her chair, still holding her hand. "I love you, Sophia. I believe I have loved you since that day in your father's garden, when you stood among the roses and dared to challenge me." Joy rose in Sophia's chest, so intense she could scarcely breathe. "I love you too, Malcolm. I have for some time. Why didn't you tell me?" She touched his face gently. "Because you needed to discover it for yourself. To choose love freely, not out of obligation." Malcolm turned his face to press a kiss into her palm. "You are wiser than I deserve." "Perhaps," she agreed with a smile. "But you're learning." He drew her to her feet and into his arms. "I have one more question, wife. Yes, husband. Will you share my bedchamber tonight, and all nights hereafter? I find I no longer wish to sleep apart from you. Sophia's answer was a kiss, sweet and deep and full of promise. And as Malcolm swept her up into his arms to carry her upstairs, she knew that their marriage of convenience had truly become something far more rare and precious, a union of hearts, freely given, that would warm them both for all their days to come.